Walk into any Masonic lodge and you'll see symbols everywhere. The square and compass, the checkered floor, the pillars, the all-seeing eye. Most people think it's decoration, theatrical mystery designed to make the organization seem important. But those symbols aren't decoration. They're language, a visual code pointing to principles so fundamental that if you truly understood them, you'd realize the entire structure of reality operates on geometry. Not the geometry you learned in school, measuring angles and calculating areas. Sacred geometry, the mathematics of creation itself. And Freemasonry, along with every mystery school that came before it, has guarded this knowledge for one reason. Because those who understand how to work with these patterns gain access to creative power that most people will never touch. Sacred geometry isn't symbolic. It's structural. The patterns you see repeated in nature, the spiral of a nautilus shell, the hexagonal cells of a honeycomb, the branching of trees, the formation of crystals, these aren't accidents. They're the visible expression of invisible laws. Mathematical principles governing how energy organizes itself into form. And when you understand these principles, when you learn to recognize them and work with them consciously, you're no longer guessing. You're building. Not just physical structures. Realities. Because the same geometric laws that govern the construction of cathedrals govern the construction of lives. And that's the secret Freemasonry has been protecting. The Freemasons emerged from the guilds of medieval stonemasons, craftsmen who built the great cathedrals of Europe. But these weren't just laborers. They were initiates. They understood that the buildings they created were more than shelter. They were amplifiers. Spaces designed to elevate consciousness, to create specific emotional and energetic states in those who entered. And the knowledge of how to do this, how to shape space so that it shapes the human being within it, that was passed down through initiation. Not written in books, not taught in public, but transmitted from master to apprentice, ensuring that only those ready to wield the knowledge received it. And here's why it was guarded. Because sacred geometry is not just about creating beautiful buildings. It's about understanding the fundamental laws of manifestation. How energy becomes matter. How thought becomes form. How the invisible becomes visible. And those who grasp these laws, who internalize them, who apply them, they gain the ability to create in alignment with the universe instead of against it. They stop forcing. They stop struggling. They start building with precision. And precision, when applied to the architecture of reality, produces results that seem miraculous to those who don't understand the mechanics. But it's not magic. It's geometry. And geometry, once understood, is the most practical tool you'll ever use. But why guard it? Why not teach it openly? Because knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Sacred geometry in the wrong hands, in the hands of those motivated by greed, by power, by the desire to dominate, becomes a weapon. It's been used that way throughout history. Symbols manipulated to control. Structures designed to suppress. Frequencies weaponized to disorient. And the mystery schools understood this. They understood that the knowledge had to be protected until the student was ready. Until they'd proven, through discipline and integrity, that they wouldn't misuse what they were given. So they created degrees, levels of initiation, each one testing the character of the student. And only when the student passed, only when they demonstrated readiness, did the next layer of knowledge unfold. Today, the secrecy is loosening. Not because Freemasonry is opening its doors, but because consciousness is rising. More people are ready. More people are asking the right questions. And the knowledge that was once locked behind ritual and initiation is now available to anyone willing to study, to practice, to apply. But access without understanding is noise. And understanding without application is theory. The real power of sacred geometry isn't in knowing the shapes. It's in using them, in recognizing where they appear in your life and learning to work with them intentionally, to create spaces that support your energy, to structure your day in rhythms that align with natural law, to think in patterns that resonate with the architecture of reality itself. And when you do that, when you start building your life geometrically, everything becomes easier. Not because effort disappears, because effort becomes effective. The square and compass, the most recognizable Masonic symbol, isn't just a logo. It's instruction. The square represents the material world. For sides, 90-degree angles. Structure, stability, the physical. The compass represents the spiritual. It draws circles, which have no beginning and no end. Infinity, eternity, the divine. And when the two overlap, when square and circle intersect, you get the most fundamental principle of sacred geometry. The integration of spirit and matter, heaven and earth, the infinite expressed through the finite. And that's not symbolism. That's the blueprint of creation. And once you understand it, once you see how it operates in your own life, you stop seeing reality as random and start seeing it as responsive. Because it is. And geometry is the language it speaks. Sacred geometry begins with the simplest form, the circle, one point, one radius, one unbroken line. The circle is unity, wholeness, the undifferentiated source from which everything emerges. Before there was form, there was the circle, the 0 point, the void that contains all potential. And from that one circle, through precise geometric relationships, every other form unfolds. Not randomly, mathematically, according to laws that cannot be broken because they're woven into the fabric of existence itself. Draw one circle, then draw another of the same size, overlapping so that the center of each passes through the edge of the other. And in the space where they intersect, you get the vesica piscis, the almond shape, the womb, the portal. And this shape, this simple overlap of two circles, is the foundation of creation. It's the first division, the moment one becomes two. And from two comes three. And from three, infinity. The vesica piscis appears everywhere. It's the shape of the human eye. The fish, an ancient symbol of Christ. The vulva, the gateway of birth. Wherever two forces meet and generate a third, you'll find this shape. And it's not metaphor. It's mechanics. Keep drawing circles. Overlapping. Equal size. Equal spacing. And you generate the flower of life, a pattern found carved into the walls of temples in Egypt, Ireland, Turkey, China, Japan. Civilizations that never contacted each other independently discovered the same pattern. Because the pattern isn't cultural. It's universal. It's the blueprint. And within the flower of life, every other geometric form can be derived. The Platonic solids, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence. All of it hidden within this one simple pattern of overlapping circles. And if you can understand this, if you can see how complexity emerges from simplicity through precise relationships, you begin to understand how reality itself is structured. The 5 Platonic solids are the building blocks of physical matter. The tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, the icosahedron. These are the only three-dimensional shapes where every face is identical, every edge is the same length, and every angle is equal. perfect symmetry. And Plato taught that these 5 solids correspond to the elements. Tetrahedron is fire. Cube is earth. Octahedron is air. Icosahedron is water. Dodecahedron is ether, the container for all others. And modern chemistry, despite having no knowledge of Plato's philosophy, discovered that molecular structures follow these exact patterns. Crystals form as cubes. Viruses form as icosahedrons. Carbon bonds as tetrahedrons. The shapes Plato identified 2,400 years ago are the shapes matter actually takes. Because geometry is an invention. It's discovery. Then there's the golden ratio, phi, 1.618. The most aesthetically pleasing proportion, but it's not about beauty. It's about efficiency. Nature uses the golden ratio because it's the most efficient way to grow and pack. Sunflower seeds spiral outward in phi proportions. Pine cones arrange their scales in phi spirals. Hurricanes rotate in phi spirals. Galaxies spin in phi spirals. And your body, when measured, reveals phi everywhere. The length of your forearm to your hand. Your height to your navel. The proportions of your face. You're not just living in sacred geometry. You are sacred geometry. Walking, breathing, embodied. And the Fibonacci sequence, where each number is the sum of the 2 before it, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, this sequence, when you divide consecutive numbers, approaches phi. And it appears in growth patterns everywhere. The branching of trees follows Fibonacci. The arrangement of leaves on a stem follows Fibonacci. The reproduction of rabbits follows Fibonacci. It's the algorithm of expansion. And when you recognize this, when you see that the same mathematical patterns appear at every scale, from the microscopic to the cosmic, you understand that there's an intelligence organizing reality. Not a bearded man in the sky. An inherent order. A structural elegance. And you, as a conscious being, can align with that order. Or resist it. But you can't escape it. Freemasonry guards this knowledge because understanding these patterns isn't just intellectual. It's transformative. When you truly see how geometry structures everything, you can't unsee it. You start noticing it everywhere. In your relationships. In your habits. In the way your thoughts organize themselves. And once you see it, you can work with it. You can use the golden ratio to create spaces that feel harmonious. You can use the Fibonacci sequence to structure your goals in a way that allows natural growth instead of forced effort. You can use the Platonic solids to understand the elemental forces within yourself and bring them into balance. This isn't abstract. It's applied. And application is where knowledge becomes power. Sacred geometry doesn't just govern the physical world. It structures consciousness itself. Your thoughts don't scatter randomly. They organize geometrically. Your emotions don't arise chaotically. They follow patterns. And those patterns, when you learn to recognize them, can be influenced, shaped, directed, because consciousness, like matter, operates according to laws. And geometry is one of those laws. This is what the mystery schools understood, that the same principles governing the construction of a cathedral govern the construction of a mind. And when you build a mind geometrically, deliberately, you build a mind that can hold power without collapsing under it. Take the triangle. 3 points. 3 lines. Once connected, the structure cannot collapse without breaking. This is why triangulation is used in engineering, why tripods are stable, and why triads appear in every transformative process. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Problem, reaction, solution, body, mind, spirit. The triangle is the minimum structure required for stability. And in consciousness, the same applies. If you want to create lasting change, you need 3 points. Awareness of where you are, vision of where you want to be, and action that bridges the gap. Remove any one, and the structure collapses. Awareness without vision leads to paralysis. Vision without action leads to fantasy. Action without awareness leads to chaos. But when all 3 are present, transformation is inevitable, because you've created a stable geometric structure, and stable structures don't collapse. The square represents foundation, for corners, for directions, for elements. And in consciousness, the square is discipline, routine, the container that holds your energy long enough for creation to occur. Without the square, energy dissipates. You have ideas but no follow-through, desires but no manifestation, because there's no structure to hold the energy in place. But when you create a square, when you establish routines, boundaries, commitments, the energy concentrates. It builds. And eventually, it breaks through into form. This is why ritual is so central to Masonic practice. Not because the ritual itself is magical, because ritual creates a container, a geometric structure in consciousness. And within that structure, transformation can occur safely and predictably. The circle, in consciousness, is wholeness, integration, the return to unity after the journey through duality. You begin as the circle, undifferentiated potential. You move into the square, structure and discipline. You encounter the triangle, conflict and resolution. And eventually, you return to the circle. But not the same circle, a transformed one. You carry the lessons, the scars, the growth, and this cycle repeats, spiraling upward. Each time you complete the circuit, you return to the circle at a higher level. This is the spiral. Not a flat circle, but a circle that ascends, evolution, growth, the path of the soul through experience. And when you understand this, when you recognize that life moves in spirals, you stop expecting linear progress. You stop panicking when you encounter the same issue again. Because you're not back where you started. You're at the same point on the spiral, but higher. And that makes all the difference. Freemasonry teaches this through allegory. The journey from darkness to light. From ignorance to knowledge. The candidate enters blindfolded, symbolizing unconsciousness. Through initiation, the blindfold is removed, symbolizing awakening. And the process continues through degrees, each one representing a geometric unfoldment of awareness. The rough ashlar, the unrefined stone, symbolizes the untrained mind. The perfect ashlar, smooth and squared, symbolizes the disciplined consciousness. And the work of shaping the rough into the perfect is the great work. The work every initiate is here to do. Not just Masons. Every human being. Because we're all walking around as rough ashlars. And life, through its challenges, its pressures, its relentless friction, is chiseling us into shape. And we can resist that process and suffer. Or we can understand it and cooperate. And cooperation is geometry. It's aligning with the pattern instead of fighting it. But consciousness isn't just individual. It's collective. And when multiple minds align geometrically, when intentions synchronize, when energies organize into coherent patterns, the power multiplies exponentially. This is why secret societies form lodges. Why they meet in specific configurations. Why they perform rituals in unison. Not for theatrics. For resonance. Because consciousness, when structured geometrically, amplifies. One person holding a vision generates a small field. 100 people holding the same vision in geometric alignment generate a field that can shift entire regions. This has been tested. Studies on group meditation show measurable reductions in crime and violence in surrounding areas. Not because of positive thinking, because of geometric resonance. Consciousness, when structured, has force, and force, when directed, moves reality. Understanding sacred geometry intellectually changes nothing. Applying it changes everything. And application requires tools. Not just compasses and rulers, though those can help, but perceptual tools. Ways of seeing, ways of thinking, ways of creating that align with geometric law. And these tools, while they sound abstract, are intensely practical. Because geometry isn't theory. It's the operating system reality runs on. And once you learn to code in that language, you gain the ability to build with precision instead of hoping things work out. The first tool is proportion. Everything in nature follows proportion. The relationship between parts and whole. And when proportion is correct, stability emerges. When proportion is off, collapse is inevitable. Look at your life right now. How are you allocating your time? Is work consuming 90% while relationships get 5%? That's geometric imbalance. And imbalance, according to geometric law, cannot sustain. Eventually, the overloaded side will crack. Or the neglected side will atrophy and pull everything down. But when you adjust proportion, when you redistribute energy so that each area of your life gets what it needs relative to the whole, stability returns. Not perfection, proportion. And proportion is the foundation of all sustainable structures. The second tool is symmetry. But not rigid symmetry. Dynamic symmetry. In nature, perfect symmetry is rare. A face is roughly symmetrical, but not exactly. A tree branches symmetrically in general structure, but each branch is unique. This is balance without rigidity. Strength that can adapt. And in your life, the same principle applies. You need routines, but they must breathe. You need structure, but not at the expense of spontaneity. Dynamic symmetry is holding form while allowing flexibility. It's knowing when to push and when to yield, when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to rest. And this isn't something you calculate. It's something you feel. You develop sensitivity to the balance point. And once you have that sensitivity, you stop overcorrecting. You stop swinging between extremes. You stabilize. And from stability, you can build. The third tool is the center. Every geometric form has a center point, the place from which all else radiates. And in your life, you need a center, not a physical location, an internal anchor, a set of values, a core knowing of who you are beneath the roles and the masks. When you have a strong center, you can move through chaos without losing yourself. You can bend without breaking. Because no matter how far you move from center, you always know how to return. And this is why practices like meditation matter. Why silence matters. Why solitude matters. These aren't escapes. They're returns. Returns to center. And every return strengthens the center. And a strong center is the foundation of all geometric creation. Because if the center is weak, if it shifts with every wind, the entire structure built around it becomes unstable. But when the center holds, everything else can move and the structure remains intact. The fourth tool is repetition. Geometry doesn't appear once. It repeats. Fractals are patterns that replicate at every scale. Zoom in on a fern leaf and you see the same pattern. Zoom in again. Same pattern. Zoom in again. Still the same. This is how nature builds complexity from simplicity. One pattern, repeated infinitely. And in your life, repetition is how you build momentum. One aligned action doesn't create transformation. But one aligned action repeated daily for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, that creates a fractal. What started small becomes vast. What seemed insignificant becomes monumental. Because repetition compounds. And compounding is geometric growth. Not linear. Exponential. And exponential growth, once it reaches a tipping point, becomes unstoppable. So the tool here is consistency. Not intensity. Not perfection. Consistency. Show up. Repeat the pattern. And trust that the geometry will unfold on its own. Because it will, it's law. The fifth tool is the golden mean. The balance point. And this is the most subtle tool because it's not a formula. It's a sensitivity. The golden mean isn't 50-50. It's not equal distribution. It's the proportion that creates optimal growth. And that proportion shifts depending on context. Sometimes you give more. Sometimes you receive more. Sometimes you push. Sometimes you wait. And those who develop the ability to sense the golden mean, who can feel when the balance is right, those are the ones who create with elegance. Not struggle. Not force. Elegance. And elegance is geometry made visible. It's the path of least resistance that produces maximum result. And it's available to anyone willing to slow down, pay attention, and trust the feel of rightness over the logic of calculation. Knowing sacred geometry is useless if you don't become it. And becoming it requires a shift from student to practitioner. From someone who understands the patterns to someone who embodies them. Freemasonry's goal, beneath all the degrees and rituals and symbols, is this: to transform the initiate into a living temple. A walking expression of the principles they've studied. And while Freemasonry has its methods, the principle is universal. You become sacred geometry by living it. By structuring your days, your relationships, your thoughts according to its laws. And when you do, life stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like sculpture. You're no longer reacting. You're shaping. Living as sacred geometry means recognizing that your body already is geometric. Your spine is a column. Your ribcage is a vault. Your limbs extend in proportion. Your organs arrange themselves in patterns that mirror the Platonic solids. And when you honor this, when you move in ways that support your body's natural geometry instead of distorting it, health follows. Not as something you chase, as something you embody. The body knows its own architecture. And when you stop interfering with it, when you stop forcing it into shapes that violate its design, it returns to balance. Automatically. Because geometry is self-correcting. When allowed. Living as sacred geometry means you structure your time in rhythms. Not rigid schedules. Rhythms. Morning, afternoon, evening, night, for quarters of the day, each with its own energy. Morning is creation. Afternoon is building. Evening is integration. Night is rest. And when you honor these quarters, when you stop trying to force productivity at midnight or rest at noon, you align with the natural geometry of time. And time stops fighting you. It supports you. Because you're no longer resisting its structure. You're moving with it. Living as sacred geometry means you see relationships as intersections. Two circles overlapping. The vesica piscis. The space where you meet is sacred. That's where creation happens. But both circles must remain whole. If one collapses into the other, there's no intersection. There's fusion. And fusion isn't love. It's codependence. But when two whole beings meet and create a shared space while maintaining their integrity, that's when the relationship becomes generative. That's geometry. Not merging. Overlapping. And the overlap is where the magic lives. Living as sacred geometry also means you let things end when they're complete. The circle closes. The spiral ascends. And what was once necessary is no longer needed. Endings aren't failures. They're geometry. Holding on to what's geometrically complete creates stagnation. And stagnation is death. But releasing what's complete makes space for the next form to emerge. The next cycle. The next spiral. Life isn't a line. It's a spiral. And spirals don't end. They expand. And expansion requires release. So you honor the completions. You bless what was. And you turn toward what's coming. Because geometry doesn't mourn. It transforms. And finally, living as sacred geometry means you see divinity in design. When you look at a flower and see the Fibonacci spiral, you're not looking at random beauty. You're looking at intelligence made visible. When you trace the golden ratio in a shell, you're holding proof that the same force creating galaxies is creating mollusks. The design is consistent. And the designer isn't separate from the design. It's the design, aware of itself. And you're part of that design. Not observing it from outside. Participating in it from within. And when you recognize that the patterns creating stars are the same patterns creating you, reverence becomes unavoidable. Not religious reverence. Geometric reverence. The kind that comes from seeing that you're not separate from creation. You are creation. And creation creates through geometry. Freemasonry guards sacred geometry because it's sacred. Not in the sense of untouchable. In the sense of powerful. And power requires readiness. Responsibility. Wisdom. But the time for guarding is ending. The knowledge is surfacing. And those who are ready, those who feel the pull, those who recognize that the universe operates on pattern and not chaos, they're the ones who will take this knowledge and use it. Not to dominate. To create. To build lives, relationships, systems that reflect the harmony embedded in the structure of reality itself. The blueprint has always been here. Visible in every leaf, every shell, every spiral, and now it's time to stop just admiring it. It's time to build with it. Because sacred geometry isn't decoration. It's the language reality speaks. And once you learn to speak it, reality listens. And responds. And bends. Not by magic. By law. And law, when understood and applied, is the most powerful tool you'll ever hold.